In the ballroom glittering with champagne and power on Christmas Eve, everyone fell silent as the black single father named David Bryant approached the grand piano. He only meant to play a soft melody to calm his restless son. But the moment the notes began to rise, CEO Sandra Smith stood frozen. It was the exact song her first love had composed only for her, a secret no one else could possibly know. Her breath caught, her world tilting, because the man who wrote that song had died 14 years ago. So how could he play it? The Executive Tower's grand atrium had already been transformed into an opulent winter celebration by the time David arrived that evening. Golden lights wound through towering evergreens like strings of captured stars, and the aroma of mulled wine and roasted chestnuts mingled with expensive perfume. Executives and board members clustered in circles, crystal glasses refracting the glow of an enormous tree positioned near the marble fountain. David Bryant moved through the crowd like a shadow passing through light. His worn black jacket and simple shirt marked him as staff for the evening's entertainment, background music, ambient presence. His dark hands still carried faint traces of charcoal beneath the nails, remnants of the commissioned portrait he'd rushed to finish that afternoon. At 38, he moved with a careful economy of motion that most people registered only as invisibility. They saw the hired musician. They didn't see the virtuoso whose fingers once commanded standing ovations in university concert halls, whose photograph had appeared in art sections as an emerging black classical talent before everything shattered. They didn't see the nights he still woke up gasping from nightmares about crushing metal and screaming pain. His son Isaiah clung to his hand. The 9-year-old's slender frame practically hummed with nervous energy despite the inhaler tucked in David's pocket. Isaiah's tight coils were freshly shaped, his brown eyes darting between the towering Christmas tree and the elaborate ice sculpture near the hors d'oeuvres. David watched him with the kind of love that felt like carrying hot coals in his chest. Fierce and protective and threaded with the constant fear that he wasn't enough, could never be enough. No designer clothes, no private tutors, just a one-bedroom walk-up where the heating sometimes failed and the neighborhood park where Isaiah sometimes heard his father play the community center's battered upright when David thought no one was paying attention. Across the atrium, Sandra Smith stood on the executive balcony, observing her company's annual gala with the controlled poise of someone who had learned early that showing emotion was showing weakness. At 36, she had dragged her family's failing manufacturing company back from the brink of bankruptcy and transformed Smith Holdings into a diversified empire spanning 3 states. Her chestnut hair fell in loose waves that had required 45 minutes with a stylist, and the blush pink dress she wore, elegant wrap silhouette, long sleeves, demure neckline, projected exactly the image her mother had insisted upon. Powerful but palatable, successful but not threatening. But it was her eyes that truly revealed her. Hazel and guarded. They moved across the crowd with the vigilance of someone who had learned that trust was a liability, that warmth could be weaponized, that caring too much meant losing control. Her executive team called her brilliant. Her competitors called her calculating. No one called her vulnerable. Yet beneath the carefully constructed armor of boardroom victories and strategic engagements, Sandra carried a grief that had calcified into something harder than bone. 14 years ago, when she was 22 and still believed the world rewarded goodness, she had fallen in love with a boy named Raymond Bright. He was a composition student, all intensity and creative fire, the kind of artist who saw music in everything, in rainfall, in traffic, in the rhythm of her breathing when she fell asleep against his shoulder. He had written her a song, just for her. He called it Midnight Reverie, and he played it for her one night on the Arts Center roof under a canopy of stars, telling her it contained everything he felt but couldn't find words to express. 6 weeks later, Raymond died in a hiking accident in the mountains outside the city. The song died with him, or so Sandra believed. She never heard it played again. She had forbidden herself from listening to music the way she once had, treating it now as elevator noise, background static, afraid that if she allowed herself to feel anything resembling that depth of emotion again, she would come apart completely and never reassemble herself into something functional. She had built her entire adult life on the principle that feeling less meant hurting less. That control was the same thing as strength. That if she just worked hard enough, achieved enough, proved herself indispensable enough, The hollow place Raymond's death had carved in her chest would somehow fill itself in. It hadn't worked. But she had become very, very good at pretending it had. David Winters had perfected the art of invisibility. At 34, he moved through the world like a shadow, working overnight at corporate towers, sleeping in fragments between Isaiah's school drop-offs and pickup, his trumpet case gathering dust in a closet because injured hands and exhausted bodies don't make music. Nobody looked twice at the black man in the uniform, which was exactly how he needed it. Visible enough to keep his job, invisible enough to keep his son safe from questions about why a Juilliard graduate was checking IDs at 2 a.m. Sandra Smith had perfected the art of ice. At 36, she ran her late father's real estate empire with ruthless precision, her engagement to Owen Matthews appearing in Forbes as a merger of dynasties. Nobody remembered the girl who'd laughed too loud at Columbia parties, who'd loved a boy named Raymond with reckless abandon until his heart gave out junior year and took hers with it. She'd rebuilt herself into something sharper, colder. A woman who closed billion-dollar deals without blinking, who wore her emotional armor like diamonds. The Christmas gala at the Bergman Foundation was where their worlds collided with the inevitability of fate. David was working the coat check, present but unseen, when Isaiah's inhaler clattered from his pocket. The 7-year-old's breath came in desperate gasps, his small chest heaving, and David dropped to his knees, hands shaking as he fumbled the inhaler. Not here. Not now. Not in front of these people. Does he always make such a scene? Owen's voice cut through the crowd, loud enough to turn heads. There's a child's hospital downtown for this sort of thing. The ballroom fell silent. David's jaw clenched, every muscle screaming to respond. But invisible men don't talk back. They swallow rage like medicine. Owen. Sandra's voice was silk wrapped around steel. She materialized beside them, her Valentino gown a whisper of red against the marble floor. Go check on the Hendersons. Sandra, I don't think. Now. She knelt in her $1,000 dress, unconcerned with propriety, her hands steady on Isaiah's back. Slow breaths, sweetheart. In through your nose. That's it. Her Mandarin-accented English was soft, practiced, as if she'd done this before. David watched her, this woman who should have been just another diamond-dripping socialite, and saw something flicker behind her carefully constructed facade. Recognition, perhaps, or remembering. The way her hand trembled slightly before she steadied it. The way her eyes softened at Isaiah's frightened face. When Isaiah's breathing finally evened, Sandra stood, meeting David's eyes for the first time. Something passed between them in that moment. Two people who understood the weight of masks, the exhaustion of performance, the lonely burden of survival. Thank you, David said quietly. Sandra nodded once, her armor already rebuilding. But as she walked away, she glanced back, just for a heartbeat, as if she too had felt the ground shift beneath her carefully constructed world. Isaiah tugged his father's sleeve as the gala wound down, guests drifting toward the exits like champagne bubbles dissipating. Daddy, can you play? Please? Just once. The Steinway Grand sat abandoned in the empty atrium, its black lacquer reflecting the twinkling lights like a dark mirror. David's hands throbbed, the old injury always worse in cold weather, nerves remembering what muscles tried to forget. Isaiah, we need to go. Please. His son's eyes were still red-rimmed from the attack, and David had never been able to deny him anything. Not after everything they'd survived. David's fingers found the keys hesitantly, testing, remembering. Then muscle memory took over and he was 20 again, whole again, pouring everything he couldn't say into sound. The melody unfurled like smoke, haunting, complex, a jazz ballad that turned classical in unexpected moments. Midnight Reverie. The piece he'd written in the summer changed everything. Sandra was halfway to her car when the music stopped her cold. She knew those opening notes the way she knew her own heartbeat. Impossible. She'd heard this melody exactly once, 14 years ago, performed by a boy who'd been dead for 13 years. Raymond had played it at the Summer Arts Intensive at Tanglewood, his trumpet golden under starlight, his smile wide as he dedicated it to the girl who makes me believe in forever. Her heels clicked against marble as she rushed back inside, her carefully constructed composure cracking with each step. The memories crashed over her. Raymond's laugh, his hands, the way he'd kissed her that night like they had all the time in the world. The phone call senior year, the hospital, his mother's screams, the empty grave she couldn't bring herself to visit. David's hands moved across the keys, lost in the music, until he felt eyes on him. Sandra stood at the atrium's entrance, her face drained of color, one hand pressed against the doorframe as if to steady herself. Their eyes met and David's fingers stumbled, the melody fracturing. "How do you know that song?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like glass breaking. David stood abruptly, his injured hand knocking against the keys in a discordant crash. "I should go. Isaiah. That song." Sandra moved closer, her composure shattering. "Where did you hear it? Who taught you?" "I don't know what you're talking about." David grabbed Isaiah's hand, his heart hammering. Too close. She was getting too close to truths that needed to stay buried. "Don't you dare lie to me." Her voice cracked. "Raymond wrote that. He only played it once. He died before." She stopped, her breath catching. "Who are you?" But David was already gone. Isaiah's small hand clutched in his, disappearing into the December night like smoke. Sandra stood alone in the empty atrium, her reflection fractured in the piano's lacquer. She pressed her fingers against the keys David had touched, trying to conjure ghosts from ivory and wood. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, something long frozen began, impossibly, to thaw. She didn't sleep that night. The melody played on repeat in her mind, unanswerable questions circling like vultures around a wound that had never healed. Sandra's private investigator delivered David Winters's personnel file in a manila envelope that felt obscenely thin. 2 pages. Social security number, emergency contact, none. Address in Bed-Stuy. Work history spanning only 7 years, nothing before that, as if he'd materialized fully formed at 27. No college listed. No references. No past. People didn't just appear from nowhere. Everyone left digital footprints, paper trails, evidence of existence. David Winters had none of it. She called the Bergman Foundation at dawn. "I need to speak with David Winters from security. Mr. Winters requested emergency leave yesterday, ma'am. Family matter." Sandra's coffee went cold in her hand. She'd done this. She'd pushed too hard, asked the wrong questions, and he'd vanished like smoke. Just like Raymond had vanished, sudden and permanent, leaving nothing but echoes. Professor Diane Washington's office at Juilliard smelled like old books and rosin. The woman was 70 now, her dark hands weathered but steady as she poured tea into delicate cups. "I wondered when someone would come asking about that song. You knew Raymond wrote it." Sandra's voice was carefully neutral, though her heart was hammering. "Raymond composed the opening phrase, 8 bars, beautiful but incomplete. He was too impatient to finish anything back then." Diane's smile was sad. "But there was another student that summer. A brilliant boy, shy, refused to perform publicly. Raymond heard him practicing late one night and begged him to complete the melody. Collaborative composition, Raymond on trumpet, this boy on piano. They performed it exactly once at the showcase." Sandra's tea trembled in its cup. "What was his name?" "He wouldn't let Raymond credit him. Said the music belonged to Raymond, that he was just helping a friend." Diane's eyes were distant, remembering. "After Raymond died, this boy came to the memorial service. Sat in the back. I tried to speak with him afterward, but he was gone. I never saw him again. None of us did." "What did he look like?" "Tall, black, beautiful hands, pianist's hands, and eyes that looked like he was carrying the weight of the world."
Diane met Sandra's case.
"Why are you asking about this now, after all these years?" Sandra left without answering, her mind spinning. The timeline fit. The music fit. But David would have been 20 when Raymond died, the right age, the right talent. Yet his personnel file showed no connection to Juilliard, no connection to music at all. She drove to the address in Bed-Stuy, a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. The superintendent shook his head. Winters? Left yesterday with his kid. Didn't say where. Paid through the month, though. Sandra stood on the empty street as the winter sun set, casting long shadows. She'd spent 13 years building walls to protect herself from feeling, and now those walls were crumbling because of a melody and a man who didn't exist on paper. A man who'd known Raymond. A man who'd fled the moment she got too close. She'd pushed him away with her desperation, her need for answers. And now he was gone, taking all his secrets with him. The building was supposed to be empty at 1 a.m., but the lobby piano called to David like a siren song. He'd driven in circles for 2 days, Isaiah asleep in the back seat, before admitting the truth. Running never worked. The past always found you eventually. His fingers found the keys in the darkness, and midnight reverie spilled out. Not the truncated version he'd played at the gala, but the full piece, complete with the bridge he'd written the night after Raymond died. The part no one had ever heard. You came back. Sandra stood in the lobby doorway, still in her office clothes, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She looked, David thought, like he felt. I shouldn't have run. His hands stilled on the keys. Isaiah deserves better than a father who keeps running from ghosts. Did you write it? Her voice was raw. The truth, David. Please. He closed his eyes. 14 years of silence, about to shatter. Yes, everything except the first 8 bars. Those were Raymond's, beautiful, incomplete, perfect for who he was. He asked me to finish it. I did. In one night, start to finish, thinking about. He stopped. Thinking about what? You. The word hung in the air like a confession. I saw you in the cafeteria that first day at Tanglewood. You were laughing at something Raymond said, and the sun was in your hair, and I thought I'd never seen anything so beautiful. I was a scholarship kid from Baltimore, one of 3 black students there. You were. He gestured helplessly. You were everything I could never have. Raymond knew. He asked me to help with the composition because he wanted to impress you. So I did. Sandra's hand flew to her mouth. You let him take credit. Girls like you don't see guys like me. I knew my place. The bitterness in his voice surprised them both. And when he played it for you under the stars, when you kissed him afterward, I told myself I'd done the right thing. That love was worth more than credit. And after he died, I went to the memorial, sat in the back. I saw you, Sandra, destroyed, barely holding together. And I thought, if the song brings you comfort, if it's a piece of Raymond you can keep, then let it be his. Let it be his final gift to you. You'd lost enough. Sandra sank onto the piano bench beside him, and for the first time in 13 years, she let herself weep. Not the controlled tears she'd allowed at the funeral, but raw, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. 14 years. You disappeared for 14 years. I got injured, lost my scholarship. Life happened. He held up his scarred right hand. And then there was Isaiah and survival, and the music didn't matter anymore. It mattered, she whispered fiercely. It always mattered. You always mattered, even when I didn't know you existed. They sat in the darkness, 2 people who'd spent over a decade orbiting the same ghost, finally seeing each other for the first time. Sandra reached for David's right hand without thinking, and he let her take it. Under the lobby's dim lights, she could see what she'd missed before. The scars webbing across his knuckles, the way his fingers curved slightly wrong, the tremor he couldn't quite hide. 5 years after Tanglewood, David said quietly, I'd rebuilt myself. New scholarship at Manhattan School of Music. Teaching piano to kids in Harlem. Started getting gigs, weddings, corporate events. Small stuff, but enough to dream on. He flexed his fingers, and Sandra felt them shake. Smith Manufacturing hired me for a series of executive functions. Your family's company. Sandra's blood went cold. March 15th. I was setting up in the ballroom. The rigging for the stage lights, they'd skipped the safety inspection to save money. I found out later. Metal beam came down, crushed my hand against the piano. His voice was matter-of-fact, but his jaw was tight. Severed 2 nerves. shattered 3 bones. The doctors said I was lucky to keep the hand at all. David, your company's legal team visited me in the hospital. $30,000 and an NDA. They said if I talked, they'd make sure I never worked in music again. And they did anyway, blacklisted me from every venue that worked with Smith Properties. Which in New York is. He laughed bitterly. Most of them. Sandra felt sick. She'd been building luxury condos in Chelsea that year, 26 years old and drunk on her first major project. She'd never looked at the safety reports from the events division. Never questioned how her father's company maintained its profit margins. Never thought about the bodies that built her empire. Was the malfunction deliberate? Her voice was barely a whisper. Cost-cutting. Skipped inspections for 18 months. My hand was just the first casualty they couldn't hide. David pulled away, stood, put distance between them. 6 other people got hurt that year. Smaller injuries. Same NDA, same payouts. I tried to contact them, build a case. They'd all been threatened. So I took the money, paid my medical bills, and became invisible. Why work security here? Why? Sandra's mind was racing. You knew. When you applied, you knew this was my building. Your family destroyed my life, Sandra. But the music, that was ours.
Yours, mine, Raimond's.
I couldn't let it go. His eyes met hers, and she saw everything he'd carried alone. Working in your building was the closest I could get to the life I should have had. Pathetic, right? But I'd see you in the elevator sometimes, and I'd think, at least I'm in the same room. At least I still exist somewhere in your orbit, even if you never see me. Sandra's perfectly constructed world was collapsing. Her family's wealth, her father's legacy, built on crushed hands and silenced voices and men like David who'd been erased for profit. I see you now, she whispered. Dawn broke through the lobby windows just as Owen Matthews and Eleanor Smith burst through the glass doors like an invading army. Owen's face was flushed with rage, Eleanor's expression carved from ice and entitlement. You think you can manipulate my fiancé with your sob story? Owen's voice echoed off marble. I know exactly what this is, extortion. You're trying to leverage an old workplace injury for a payout. David stood slowly, positioning himself between them and the bench where Isaiah had fallen asleep. I'm not asking for anything. That welfare kit of yours. Owen's lip curled. I'm sure the legal bills for his condition are expensive. Convenient that you suddenly reconnect with Sandra after all these years. Don't talk about my son. David's voice was dangerously quiet. Eleanor stepped forward, her designer suit immaculate even at this hour. Business casualties happen, Mr. Winters. You signed an NDA. You were compensated fairly. This melodramatic reappearance, playing on Sandra's emotions. It's transparent and pathetic. People like you always want handouts. Always playing the victim. Mom! Sandra's voice cut through the lobby like a blade. Stay out of this, Sandra. This man is clearly... Mom! Sandra moved to stand beside David, her body trembling with something that looked like fury. Do you hear yourself? Business casualties. He lost his career. You destroyed his life for profit. Isaiah stirred on the bench, his small face crumpling as the shouting registered. Daddy, people like him, Sandra continued, her voice rising, are the people your company crushes so you can afford another yacht, so I can afford another gala dress. Our wealth is built on bodies like David's, and I'm done pretending otherwise. You're being hysterical, Owen snapped. This man is manipulating you with some fantasy about music and... Sandra pulled the engagement ring from her finger. The diamond caught the morning light as she placed it in Owen's palm. We're done. This farce of an engagement, this performance we've been staging. I'm done. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Eleanor's face went white, then red. If you do this, you'll lose everything. The company, your inheritance, your reputation. I will make sure you're destroyed, Sandra. Both of you. I have lawyers who will bury you in litigation until you're bankrupt. And I have every safety report you've buried for the last 20 years. Sandra's voice was steel. Every skipped inspection, Every injury you've covered up, every NDA you've forced on vulnerable people. Try me, mother. Please. I'd love to see how that plays in the press. Owen's face twisted. You'll regret this. Both of you. I'll make sure every media outlet knows about your little security guard romance. The CEO who threw everything away for. Get out. Sandra's voice was quiet now, deadly. Security. 2 guards appeared, looking uncomfortable as they approached their own kind. Owen and Eleanor left spewing threats and venom, their expensive shoes clicking against marble like warning shots. The lobby fell silent except for Isaiah's quiet crying. David gathered his son close, murmuring comfort. Sandra stood alone in the wreckage of her old life, her hands shaking, her carefully constructed world in ruins around her. She'd never felt more free. Sandra's voice was raw when she asked, "Will you play it one more time? The real version. All of it." David looked at his scarred hand, then at Isaiah rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Come here, little man. I'll teach you the easy parts." Isaiah climbed onto the bench, fitting perfectly under his father's arm. David's damaged right hand trembled as it found the higher keys, but his left was steady, and Isaiah's small fingers followed where he guided them. The opening bars of Midnight Reverie filled the empty lobby. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. A father teaching his son despite broken nerves and crushed dreams. A melody that had survived death and erasure and 14 years of silence. Sandra watched them, and something fundamental shifted in her chest. This wasn't the past reaching back to claim her. This was a doorway opening onto something she'd thought impossible. A future built on truth instead of performance. When the last notes faded, she took David's scarred hand in both of hers. The tremor was still there, the damage permanent. "Would you be brave enough to build something real, knowing what it'll cost?" David looked at her for a long moment, seeing all the ways this could destroy them both. Then he nodded. "Yeah, I think I will." The months that followed were brutal. Owen's media campaign launched within 48 hours. Leaked NDAs framed as David's pattern of shakedowns. Carefully worded articles about security staff with questionable backgrounds gaining access to vulnerable executives. The dog whistles were transparent to anyone listening. Urban violence, absent father, welfare fraud. Every racist trope is wrapped in plausible deniability. But Professor Washington emerged from retirement with documentation. Original sheet music in David's handwriting, dated rehearsal tapes, testimonies from other Tanglewood students. She gave interviews about systemic erasure of black artists, about how institutions stole credit while crushing careers. The narrative shifted, slowly, then suddenly, from scandal to reckoning. Sandra's board fractured. 3 members resigned in solidarity with Eleanor. 5 stayed, drawn by Sandra's promise to restructure safety protocols and worker protections. 2 remained neutral, waiting to see who'd survive. Eleanor Smith left the company rather than face investigation, retreating to the Connecticut estate where she could maintain the fiction of dignity. She stopped taking Sandra's calls. David began teaching piano at community centers in Bed-Stuy and Harlem. His right hand would never be what it was, but he learned to work within his limitations, teaching children that broken things could still make beauty. Isaiah sat in on every lesson, a permanent fixture at his father's side. Sandra liquidated assets to fund the safety overhaul. The company's value dropped 30%. Her personal wealth dropped further. She slept better than she had in years. Some nights, David would show up at Sandra's penthouse after Isaiah was asleep, his hands shaking from overuse. She'd make tea while he played her piano. Not performing, just existing in the music. Relearning what it meant to create without armor. They were building something fragile and real from the wreckage of their separate devastations. It was terrifying. It was necessary. It was finally true. The concert hall was packed. Every seat filled for the first Raymond Bright Memorial Arts Scholarship benefit. Sandra had insisted on using Smith Holdings' annual gala budget for this. Funding for underrepresented students in the arts, named for the boy who'd started it all. Her board had split 3-2. She'd won. Backstage, David adjusted his bow tie with shaking hands while Isaiah and 7 other students from his community center classes fidgeted in their concert blacks. "Remember," he told them quietly, "the mistakes don't matter. What matters is that we're here, making sound together." Sandra found him in the wings, radiant in a crimson gown that felt like defiance and celebration all at once. No more performing whiteness for rooms full of people who'd never see her anyway. No more ice. "You ready?" she asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "But Isaiah threatened to disown me if I backed out, so..." She kissed him softly. "Then let's give them something to remember." The stage lights came up. David walked out first, Isaiah at his side, followed by the students. Black, brown, poor, brilliant. All of them scholarship kids who'd been told in 1,000 subtle ways that stages like this weren't for them. Professor Washington sat in the front row, tears already streaming. David's scarred right hand found the opening notes of Midnight Reverie, and the melody unfurled like it had that night at Tanglewood, like it had at Raymond's memorial, like it had in the empty lobby when everything changed. But this time, Isaiah joined him on the second verse, tentative but growing stronger. Then the students added their parts: violin, cello, flute, trumpet, each one carrying a piece of the story. And then the new movement David had composed began. Not loss, not grief, but transformation, the sound of breaking open and refusing to stay broken. The melody climbed and fractured and rebuilt itself, again and again, each iteration stronger. Resilience in music form. When the final note faded, the silence held for 3 heartbeats before the audience erupted. Sandra walked onto the stage, not caring about protocol or propriety. David stood, and she took his scarred hand in front of everyone. Board members, donors, journalists, ghosts. "This melody broke me open twice," she said into the microphone, her voice steady. "When Raymond died and when it led me back to you. To all of you," she gestured to the students. "This is what we're building now. Not empires built on silence, but the community is built on truth." Isaiah tugged David's sleeve. "Can we get ice cream now? With extra toppings?" The laughter rippled through the hall, warm and real. David scooped Isaiah up, and Sandra tucked herself against his side, and they walked off stage together. Not a perfect family, but a chosen one. Scarred and honest and refusing to be invisible. Professor Washington watched them go, her hand pressed to her heart. She'd spent 50 years in music, and she knew this truth absolutely. The most powerful music comes from people who've been broken but refused to stay silent. The melody would live on, changed, but undefeated. Always. The community garden was in full bloom, summer flowers rioting against chain-link fences that had once marked boundaries, but now held climbing roses. David sat on a repurposed bench beside Sandra. Isaiah sprawled between them with dirt under his fingernails and a satisfied grin. Around them, neighbors gathered for the garden's official opening. Dominican grandmothers, young Black professionals, Haitian families, everyone who decided this patch of reclaimed concrete would become something living. A young Black girl, maybe 16, sat at the donated upright piano they'd positioned under the community pavilion. Her hands hovered over the keys, hesitant. "Go ahead," David called to her. "We're listening." She began to play, something original, raw, brilliant in the way only teenage compositions could be. Technically imperfect, but emotionally devastating. David recognized himself at that age, full of sound but terrified to be heard. When she finished, he walked over. "That was extraordinary. What's your name?" "Imani." She wouldn't meet his eyes. "It's probably not good enough for real performances, though." "Who told you that?" She shrugged. "My school counselor said I should focus on practical skills. Music's not realistic for someone like me." David knelt so he could look her in the eye. "Your voice matters. Don't let anyone make you small. There will always be people who want you silent because your sound threatens their comfort. Play anyway." Sandra watched him, this man who'd spent 14 years invisible, now teaching visibility as an act of revolution. 14 years from that summer at Tanglewood to this moment. A lifetime of breaking and rebuilding, of learning that love wasn't performance but presence. That night, After Isaiah fell asleep, Sandra found David at the upright piano in the community center, the one she'd bought with money from her first independent real estate deal, untainted by family history. "Play me something unprecedented," she said. "Something just ours. No ghosts." David's scarred hands found the keys, searching. The melody came slowly at first, then gathering confidence. Bright where midnight reverie had been haunting, forward-looking instead of elegiac. He called it New Beginning, and it sounded like summer mornings and Isaiah's laughter in gardens growing in concrete, and two people who'd been broken learning to be whole together. "Every meaningful composition has multiple movements," David said when the music faded. "We're just starting ours." Sandra leaned against the piano, watching his hands, damaged but still creating, still refusing silence. "Then let's keep creating this together, whatever comes next. Even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts." Outside, the garden breathed in darkness, flowers closing for the night but their roots growing deeper. Imani's melody still echoed in the pavilion. Isaiah dreamed upstairs. The city hummed its endless song. David's fingers found Sandra's scarred hand in an unscarred hand, both of them holding on. Broken things become most beautiful when someone refuses to accept brokenness as final. When they insist on transformation instead of surrender. When they choose again and again to make sound in the silence. The music continues. Challenging, healing, transforming. Always.